Tonight, the massive manhunt for the shooter who killed right-wing activist Charlie Kirk.
We are investing everything we have into this, and we will catch this individual.
A person of interest, a high-powered rifle, but no clear suspect after the fatal shooting that has left Americans more angry and more polarized.
I think we're at a pretty dangerous point right now.
The swift and disturbing uptick in political violence. Ready to build fast. Ottawa announces the first 5 major projects ready for quick review.
How can we do it bigger? How can we do it faster?
The projects, the reaction,
I thought finally they get it.
and the political strategy at issue is back. The 5 hockey players acquitted of sexual assault can return to the ice.
I'm surprised at how quickly this decision came out.
The NHL's decision to clear them for play.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. More than 24 hours after prominent conservative activist Charlie Kirk was fatally shot on a Utah University campus, police aren't just searching for a motive, they are still searching for a suspect. Late tonight, releasing new grainy images of a person of interest. They know the rooftop position where the shooter took aim at Kirk as he was speaking in front of thousands of students and where he fired that single deadly shot. But the killer remains unknown and at large. This killing has left many Americans from the White House on down shocked, shaken, and bitterly divided. Katie Simpson begins our coverage tonight with the latest on the investigation.
Police scour the neighborhood where the suspect was last seen,
They're actively searching.
urgently looking for any new information about the gunman on the loose, releasing photos of a person of interest describing him as college-aged, saying he blended into the crowd at Utah Valley University.
We have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location.
In the panicked moments after Charlie Kirk was shot, smartphone video captured new clues. In this short clip, you can see what appears to be someone on that roof running away. Authorities say the gunman fled, ditching his weapon, which is now in their possession.
It is a high-powered bolt-action rifle. Investigators have also collected footwear impression, a palm print, and forearm imprints for analysis.
Kirk is survived by his wife and 2 young children. The controversial political activist embraced far-right beliefs.
And I was basically outlining what are biblical principles for a marriage straight from Scripture. And I said, wives, submit to your husbands.
So against the natural law, and dare I say, a throbbing middle finger to God, is the transgender thing happening in America right now.
He is being remembered as a leader within the MAGA movement.
Charlie, we love you. We know that you have heard the Lord's words.
President Donald Trump personally offered condolences to the family.
I spoke to Erica, his wife, and we had a long talk, and she's devastated. She is absolutely devastated.
And the vice president flew to Utah to personally escort Kirk's casket back to the family home in Arizona. Small vigils popped up across the U.S., including outside the hospital where he died.
No one can tell you what you can or can't believe, and the fact that Charlie Kirk had to die because of his beliefs is just truly heartbreaking.
At his office, where he led his political advocacy work in Arizona, and in California at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. Some of Kirk's supporters are still trying to process what's happened.
It's heartbreaking. Even if it's not unity in our ideas, we need to find unity that we're all Americans and that we're all people.
FBI Director Kash Patel has now arrived in Utah with his deputy, and they've actually just released new video showing the suspect moments after the shooting took place, and we can show some of that to you now. The suspect is wearing all black on top of the roof. We know the suspect took a shot from an elevated position, and from what we can see in this video is that the suspect makes his way across the roof and then lowers himself down onto the ground, sort of jumping from the top of that one-story building before running and then eventually walking and making his way into that wooded area where police say he ditched his weapon.
And Katie, that video came out at a news conference pretty short from the FBI. They didn't take any questions. What else did you take from that news conference?
Well, it's very clear that they're having a difficult time trying to identify this suspect. It has been a significant challenge. With every hour that passes, it becomes harder and harder to try and track down this person. It gives them more time to get away. Police originally said they would only release photos of the person of interest of the suspect in this case if they couldn't identify him. But since then, they've released a series of photos and now this video. So it shows that they are having some challenges and are really relying on the public to try to get ahead in this investigation.
Indeed, they said they've had some 7,000 tips already. All right, that's Katie Simpson in Washington. Thank you. Now, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, there's not just sorrow, but dread. As Paul Hunter shows us, if Kirk was killed for his politics, he wasn't the first, and the fear is he will not be the last.
In Minnesota in June, a former Democratic state Speaker of the House shot to death along with her husband. In Pennsylvania in April, at the residence of Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, an arson attack.
What was it about Shapiro you don't like?
And then there's last summer.
Take a look at what happened.
And that assassination attempt on then candidate Donald Trump. Now, the Charlie Kirk killing in Utah, leaving Americans stunned at the speed political violence in this country worsens.
In 20 years leading up to 2015, we had 2 incidents of political violence against elected officials. In the 10 years since, we've had 25. The numbers tell the story.
I think we're at a pretty dangerous point right now, inflection point in the United States in terms of political violence.
Amy Pate, who tracks such stuff in the U.S., says the rate of targeted violence this year doubles the rate from a year ago, and it's trending higher. She cites heated political rhetoric, polarization, access to weapons, and the gutting of prevention programs as key factors.
There's a heightened risk for this type of violence that requires some sort of a variety of policy responses.
For now, as they have in the past, U.S. politicians talk.
Thank you all. Everybody ready?
Repeating the message, there's no place for political violence in America. From Democrats,
right now, and it has to end, and we have to join together to condemn it.
And some Republicans.
The time for unity, the time for peace, it is now.
But from the White House, a different tone. Trump is already criticized for stoking the rhetoric on the killing of Kirk.
We have a radical left group of lunatics out there, just absolute lunatics, and we're going to get that problem solved.
As for South Carolina Republican Nancy Mace,
I will not be doing any outdoor events anytime soon.
She now has her own plan of action moving forward.
I will have a firearm on my person all the time.
Said Mace, Adrian, now is the time to be more vigilant than ever.
And Paul, it's pretty clear the calls for unity and calm aren't exactly universal there tonight.
Certainly, many now worry this is only making the political divide worse in this country. There's been swearing and shouting across the aisle on Capitol Hill over some of the fallout. The Trump administration already suggesting it may take action against some who criticize Kirk or make light of the killing. You know, we talk a lot about the political temperature, but among regular Americans, check the comments on social media, Adrian. They run the gamut, and it's ugly as those divisions deepen.
All right. Paul Hunter in Washington tonight. Thank you. Here in Canada, a major announcement from the federal government, one many Canadians have been watching closely for. The Prime Minister is laying out which major infrastructure projects his government will try to fast-track. An LNG facility, a port, and a nuclear project are among them. A pipeline is not. Rafi Boudjikanian takes us through the list and the reaction rolling in tonight.
From this terminal in northern BC, expected to double its production of liquefied natural gas, to this nuclear plant an hour east of Toronto, Ottawa's big bet on kickstarting the Canadian economy is coming into focus.
For the nuclear industry, which is based in Ontario for Canada and globally, this is huge.
The small modular reactor at the Darlington site is one of 5 so-called nation-building projects Ottawa has approved for a final review by its Major Projects Office. It has also submitted expansions of copper mines in Saskatchewan and BC and the Port of Montreal. With Canada locked in a trade war with the U.S., the Prime Minister expects the projects to generate more than $60 billion in revenue.
The support is there with Indigenous partners. Much of the other work has been done. There's a few things to be done to shepherd across the line.
But an oil pipeline, a major request of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, is not on the list. Still, she's pleased with plans so far.
I can tell you that when I looked at the first 5 projects, I thought finally they get it, because it's all the projects that have been difficult to build.
British Columbia is even happier.
I am proud that 40% of the projects listed by the federal government on their priority project list today are British Columbia projects.
But it's not all rave reviews for Carney.
He's not permitted a single major mine, pipeline, nuclear plant, or anything else. What he's done today is announce that he's going to send an email to an office that isn't even fully staffed up yet.
The Prime Minister also released another list, this one of projects not quite ready for the fast-track treatment, including a high-speed rail corridor between Toronto and Quebec City and an Alberta-based carbon capture project. He said those could be in the next wave before mid-November. Rafi Boudjikani on CBC News, Edmonton.
So let's bring in our chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton, now. So, Rosie, what do you make of the response to these projects so far?
Adrian, listen, there's been a lot of positive response, maybe from places where you might not have expected it. Alberta Premier, Nova Scotia Premier, but there is criticism too. The Conservative leader skeptical that this is really going to change anything. Environmental groups suggesting the government may not be as committed to climate change as it should be, given some of the choices today. And some Indigenous groups questioning whether there will be enough consultation on these big projects, given how quickly the Prime Minister wants to move.
Presumably, I mean, clearly, the Liberals chose these 5 projects for a reason.
Yeah, these ones are pretty far along. They've already got private investment lined up. A lot of the regulatory hurdles are already crossed, which means the government can take credit once they're done and try to create some momentum ahead of, more complicated projects that may even require taxpayer money. The whole plan, though, while a response to Donald Trump's tariff war, is also in response to slowing economic growth, low productivity, employment challenges, particularly for young people. And it is really the beginning of a vast restructuring of the Canadian economy that the Prime Minister, at least, believes will create more investment and more opportunity. It starts with these major projects, but it's going to include a whole bunch of other things. A plan to build homes that could come as early as this weekend, a climate competitiveness strategy, an industrial defense strategy, all with the intent of getting Canada building more with what it already has. How that works exactly, we'll see. Canadians already feeling, as you know, so much of these economic pressures. Prime Minister has a little room to maneuver here politically, but the results will need to come very quickly.
They will indeed. Rosemary Barton, thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.
And Rosie, we'll be back in about 15 minutes with the At Issue team. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea, all here to talk major projects and what to expect when Parliament resumes next week. Charges have been laid against the driver of an SUV after it crashed into a daycare near Toronto yesterday, killing a 1.5-year-old boy.
It was really heartbreaking to see all the little children coming out on stretchers, hurt, parents terrified, scared, and it's very touching, I guess.
A 70-year-old man is facing charges of dangerous operation causing death and bodily harm. Investigators believe the crash was not intentional. 2 children remain hospitalized in critical condition. And near Quebec City, this school bus was part of a multi-vehicle crash with 24 students on board. Luckily, no one was seriously injured. Police say a transport truck rear-ended a vehicle that then hit the school bus, which was picking up a student. The cause remains under investigation. Well, the NHL says 5 players acquitted in a high-profile sexual assault trial will be eligible to play again. As Katie Nicholson explains, they could be back on the ice by the end of this year.
As soon as they were found not guilty, one big question remained. Could Michael McLeod, Alex Formenton, Carter Hart, Dylan Dubé, and Cal Foote play again in the NHL? their careers sidelined after explosive allegations surfaced accusing them of sexually assaulting a woman in a London hotel room after a Hockey Canada event in 2018.
Nobody in room 209 that night has emerged unscarred from this event. The criminal court process is a bruising experience for everyone.
But now, with their acquittals, the NHL has greenlit their return. In a statement, the league said it conducted its own extensive investigation, and while it found the players' conduct fell woefully short of the standards and values of the league, they will be eligible to sign contracts on October 15th and play by December 1st. In a statement, the NHL Players Association said it was pleased they will have the opportunity to resume their NHL careers and considers the matter closed.
I think it is sending a direct message that it wasn't a big deal. And honestly, it really was. And it was a really big deal thing to a lot of women in this country.
For those who work to root sexual violence out of sports, disappointment, but perhaps also an opportunity for change.
There is nothing more powerful than if these men owned it, apologized for it, didn't try to pretend that bad things didn't happen, whether it was deemed criminal or not, and were the people that could go out there and educate children as to the mistakes they made.
I think I'm surprised at how quickly this decision came out, but I'm not surprised by the decision itself.
The sociologist hopes the impact of the case isn't lost.
We were outraged in 2022 when we heard these allegations, that we put them together into a bigger pot and saw that there was something broken with men's elite level hockey culture in Canada, and we demanded change. I hope that we'll keep demanding that change today as we move forward.
There are more hurdles ahead of the players before they move forward. After 2 years away, can they still play at an NHL caliber? Or will any team be willing to take them? Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Today, Americans marked 24 years since the 9/11 attacks.
These were people who had their whole lives in front of them, a lot to live for. They simply went to work one day and never came home. And we must always remember them.
Nearly 3,000 people were killed when aircraft were used as weapons of terror. At the site of the attacks on the World Trade Center, the names of the victims were read aloud and people offered personal reflections on those they lost. Another ceremony was held at the Pentagon, which was also struck on September 11th, as was a site in Pennsylvania. Well, residents of a Newfoundland and Labrador community were surprised to find the water flowing from their taps was so contaminated with chemicals, it's being called undrinkable.
There are solutions, there's ways to filter this from people's water, but they can't do that if they don't know they have it.
The CBC News investigation and the calls for action next. Plus, a whale gets a second chance off the coast of British Columbia.
This was quite a bad entanglement, so it's always a risk.
The dramatic rescue. And later, after centuries of silence, an ancient instrument makes music once again.
That moment of hearing the first note emerging, it was such an overwhelming emotion.
We're back in 2 minutes. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was sentenced to more than 27 years in prison today after he was found guilty of attempting to stage a coup to stay in power after losing the 2022 election. The U.S. president quick to announce he is, quote, very unhappy with the conviction. Donald Trump previously linked a 50% tariff on Brazilian goods to this case. Well, in Newfoundland, water contaminated with toxic chemicals is flowing through some taps near St. John's. Now, a CBC News investigation reveals more homes have unsafe water after a local chemist first sounded the alarm. Jayla Bernstein shows us the real health risks this poses and the calls for the government to act.
When chemist Carl Jobst started testing for toxic chemicals, he had no idea how far the trail would lead him.
And this is essentially industrial wastewater that's being discharged from the airport.
Just on the other side of this fence line here is the St. John's International Airport, and about 1 kilometer from here is where there's a site, a former fire training area, contaminated by forever chemicals, and the culprit there is firefighting foam. Transport Canada is responsible for the site. Last year, it warned people in Pine Ridge that forever chemicals, or PFAS, had spread to some wells in that subdivision of Torbay. By doing his own further tests, Jobst has found contamination in a different area, over 3 kilometers away in a wetland called the Gully.
Oh my goodness.
Jobst tested this family's tap water. It was within Canada's guidelines, but above stricter maximums set by the United States. They bought a filter, worried about the health effects.
Nobody, government-wise, has really been doing anything. It's been a really closed-mouth type of situation, like we've had to look into it ourselves.
Jobst found contamination at just over half of the 15 homes he tested near the Gully. 4 were above Canadian limits and 4 above lower American limits. CBC Investigates had independent testing done at some of the sites, and the results were consistent with his findings. What's more, documents show that over a decade ago, Transport Canada knew contamination was spreading downstream. The local mayor is asking Ottawa to expand testing and provide bottled water. Do you think it's acceptable that Transport Canada hasn't tested anyone's drinking water on this road to date?
Well, I can't speak for Transport Canada, as I never would, but I would think that when we advise them that there's PFAS showing up in someone's drinking water, that they would act on that.
Transport Canada said it takes its responsibilities with respect to PFAS seriously. It won't comment further because of a proposed lawsuit on behalf of residents. No one knows for sure how far the contamination spreads.
There are solutions, there's ways to filter this from people's water, but they can't do that if they don't know they have it.
Now, Jobst says he's since gone back and tested the water at 2 of those homes where people now have filters installed, and he says their levels are down to near zero. For comparison, that's less than what you'd find on average in Montreal's city water.
Okay, that's important. Jayla, what do we know about other contaminated sites across the country?
Well, there are some 80 federal sites in Canada that are contaminated with these forever chemicals, and some of these chemicals have been linked to pretty serious illnesses like cancer. We asked Transport Canada to clarify if they're managing the full scope of contamination at the other sites that they monitor and manage, but so far they haven't responded to that.
All right, Jayla Bernstein, thank you. Calgary police have charged a man with break-and-enter, mischief, and disobeying a court order, alleging he tunneled into his upstairs neighbor's unit while she was away. So they say he cut a hole in her floor from below and into an open space behind her fireplace. The images show a ladder perched under the hole and a wall knocked out upstairs. There's no word on motive, but police say the woman had been having ongoing issues with her neighbor. A humpback whale is now free after being entangled in some fishing gear off the coast of BC.
This whale was a handful, very mobile. It's always very dangerous, so we took our time.
How crews worked urgently to save the whale. After the break, there's my pal. Rosie's here with that issue.
Hey, Adrian, we're back, and tonight we're going to talk about the Liberals' list of major projects.
We will remain relentlessly focused on bringing down costs for Canadians.
So what does the Liberals' list tell us about their focus? And what will these projects mean for Canadians during this trade war? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew all back to join me to talk about that and more.
We have some incredible images for you of a humpback whale being freed after being tangled up in fishing gear off the BC coast. Yasmin Renea shows us the long and delicate job of helping him escape.
It was a complex 3-day mission freeing Tutu, the humpback whale.
This whale was a handful, very mobile. It's always very dangerous, so we took our time.
The whale, about 5 years old and 9 meters long, was first spotted near one of BC's Gulf Islands, trailing nearly 140 meters of fishing gear. It took days for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and other rescuers to free Tutu because he kept moving. From near Texada Island to Comox, then toward Campbell River, at least 80 kilometers. Rescuers put a satellite tag on one of the fishing lines to track him. Removing the gear, they had to be meticulous.
And you have to be careful. So we made sure that we were doing it with minimal impact to the animal.
On the third day of the rescue mission, the whale freed himself of the remaining gear. DFO believes he was entangled for up to 2 weeks and could have suffered serious consequences.
It's always a risk of eventually causing an infection. And definitely the animal's ability to forage would have been restricted considerably. So the impact on the animal over time, depending on how long it was on, could have killed the animal.
Experts say debris is a huge problem for marine life.
It's such a significant concern on our coast, with our research supporting that about half the humpbacks have scarring from entanglement. How many are dead at the bottom of the ocean? We don't know.
Tutu is expected to live a healthy life. Properly disposing of fishing gear could be life-saving for all whales. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, let's break down the news shaping our world. Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue tonight, nation-building projects. The government selects the first of its major projects to be fast-tracked. The goal, build up Canada's economy and broaden trade.
Our plan for major nation-building projects is anchored in new corridors that connect our economy, enhance our security, and build transportation networks across this vast country and to the wider world.
So what is to be made of the Liberals' list of major projects? Do their choices reflect their focus for the future? I'm Rosemary Barton. Welcome back to the At Issue panel. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. I had many people demanding your return through the summer. So glad to see you all back here with me. Let's start with the announcement today. 5 projects that have been identified that were sort of, further along in their development and approval. What do these projects tell us, Chantal, about what the Prime Minister and what the government are trying to do?
One, they're a bit of a test run in the sense that, as you said, many of those projects have already been in the works. So the government is not, I think the government is trying to trigger more private sector interest by going with projects that are already on the drawing board or way past that to showcase how this works. I'm going to talk to you about the politics of it. I thought it landed well. And why do I say that? Because we are here in Edmonton today where Mr. Carney made the announcement. Premier Sept has no pipelines in the list, and yet she is all over social media saying how great a meeting she had with Mark Carney and how positive and optimistic she is about what is to come. I looked at the reaction in Manitoba. Wabkinou also happy. I think the Quebec government is happy. It's a rare day when you announce things like that, and the response from the provinces is so far positive.
Yeah, Tim Houston also saying this gives him hope for the province, but Danielle Smith's reaction was pretty extraordinary, saying, oh my gosh, they finally get it. So you're right to point that out, Chantal. Andrew, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I sort of feel sorry for Pierre Poilievre. He keeps getting undercut by Conservative premiers. He was pouring cold water all over this, and then Danielle Smith emerges to say what a triumph this is. I mean, it's early days. This is the first slice of these things. There are more promised to come. As Chantal said, these ones are not terribly surprising or edgy in their choices. We'll have to see in the totality when more projects are unveiled as to how much of it an actual shift in policy it represents. It still, concerns me as a matter of policy that rather than try to reduce the red tape and overly intrusive regulatory process in general for projects in general, we're doing it where we leave all the cumbersome regulations in place, but we give a buy to particular favored projects. You'll notice these were carefully distributed across the country, which tells you how intensely political this is. I think I'd rather that economics were guiding these things than politics.
Althea.
I think what's interesting is that these are mostly fully baked projects, but even then in their selling to Canadians, I think the Liberals have glossed over some of the hindrances that are still to come. Like LNG 2 is not a project without its critics. It does not have unanimous Indigenous agreement to move forward. So on some core constituencies, we don't know what the criticisms will be at, because we also don't know what loopholes the government is going to use C5 for to give them a carve out. We assume that's why they're on the list in order to get the project done. So I don't want to be trite, but like the devil is in the details. The other thing is that the 5 were the big ones that are moving forward, and then there's like the sub list of like, well, we're going to help these projects see the light of day. And the one that has Danielle Smith really excited is obviously Pathways Plus, but it's also one that will have core Liberal constituencies really anxious, because in the selling of that, the Prime Minister basically said that if that project can go forward, and it's certainly not a done deal that carbon capture actually works or will work in this way, then yes to a new oil pipeline. That is not going to be a message very well received, even within the Liberal caucus, never mind people who voted Liberal just this spring.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that is, I mean, obviously the Prime Minister says it is possible, he's never going to say no from the get-go, but there's no private proponent. It's not clear to me where that pipeline would come from. Is that even a conversation, Chantal, that you think it will happen when discussing these major projects moving forward?
I think the wise thing to do at this point is to have the conversation on how they're using the legislation. I don't disagree with Andrew on the notion that if you think that regulations are in the way, well, change the regulations. Don't give yourselves the power. Every time you see a project you like, then let's not bother with the rules on the environment or on a variety of other issues. But to not have a pipeline is wise, because what happens when you have the word pipeline, it sucks the oxygen out of the discussion and polarizes it on pipelines. Two, let's see if there is a private sector proposal on it, because at this point, it's not happening. And why is it not happening? Because even if you believe Mark Carney is going to be in government for 2 or 3 years, and the next government will still be of that persuasion, it's hard to believe that it will be enough to just say this is in the national interest to make it happen across provinces.
But just to build on that point, it's one thing to remove regulatory roadblocks. It's another thing to sort of stick your neck out politically and see it through in the face of opposition from Indigenous groups or from particular provinces that want to stick an oar in the works. So, it's one thing to say, yes, it's true that there's no private sector proponent at this point, and you can trot out the economic arguments. We've got a whole bunch of capacity came online with the Trans Mountain. The world economy situation is very unsettled. But what's also true is even if all the economic ducks were in a row, it's not clear that pipelines would get built because people would worry about the political risk. So ultimately, you've got to politically de-risk these proposals, and we've yet to see really definitively whether the government's willing to spend political capital to do that.
Althea, you want it in there?
Well, the previous Liberal government did de-risk a pipeline by buying the project and getting it done. And I think we're assuming that it will only be private capital, but I don't know that we should be assuming that. Danielle Smith is incredibly enthusiastic about something on the horizon, and I don't know what that is, but clearly there's an announcement in the works that has her excited enough that she is tweeting about it. So I think we should not close ourselves to the possibility that there may be other funding mechanisms and there may be other things coming down the pipeline that we are not sure exactly what kind of framework they're going to take.
Sure.
Yes,
Chantal, last word.
The litmus test of a successful pipeline endeavor is not the province of Alberta. It's the province of BC, Ontario, Indigenous people, Quebec. So we are back where we were. Whatever Mark Carney wants, he can't do it without provincial support across the board and without community support across the board, and that's not obvious under any funding mechanism.
Okay, but the list allows him, it gives him carrots and sticks to negotiate with the provinces. I don't think we should forget that either.
Okay, we're going to leave this part of the conversation there. When we come back, though, we are going to look ahead, the return of the House of Commons next week.
We will remain relentlessly focused on bringing down costs for Canadians.
What can we expect from MPs, the government, the opposition when they return next week? How have the dynamics shifted, if at all? That's next. At issue, the political season begins. The Liberals are returning to Parliament with a long list of goals and a promise to deliver on them fast.
We're all here to get big things done for Canadians at a scale and a pace that hasn't happened for generations.
With Pierre Poilievre back in the House, the Conservatives are ready to hold the government to task.
The message to Mark Carney and the Liberals is they need to do one thing: get out of the way.
So how has the summer changed the dynamics that we might see in the House of Commons on Monday? How is the government doing so far on delivering on its ambitious agenda? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Andrew, Althea. I mean, I almost just want to say to all three of you, so what has changed over the summer? Like, what is different now? And how will that shape what we might see on Monday? So I'll start with you on that, Andrew.
Well, we've got a little bit more of a picture of the government's agenda. You know, over the summer months, we heard about the rapid spending increases that had really only been hinted at in the election campaign. In fact, nothing of the scale that was subsequently announced. You know, similarly, we're now hearing or heard over the summer months about big spending cuts to make room for those spending increases. So we'll see the scale of those. So they're starting to fill in the gaps, but it's still pretty early days. A lot of the summer was frittered away on not particularly successful talks with the Americans on the trade front. I can't really blame whoever would be the prime minister in that case. It would be extremely difficult to make any progress with Donald Trump as a negotiating partner. But that took up a lot of the oxygen. And of course, we now have Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons. He was kind of set on his back foot after that election campaign. That took a lot of his energies and thing. And he still has to face this leadership review in January. I think the biggest problem he's facing is the Liberals seem to be moving pretty sharply to the right, taking up a lot of space that might have been occupied by the Conservatives, and it's forcing him to go even further to the right to take up policy stances that he knows the Liberals can't follow him on.
Yeah, they do seem to be continuing sort of what they did during the election, eating his lunch a little bit, Althea, whether it be on, I mean, even when they come back, the government has said one of their first pieces of legislation will be bail legislation, which is something the Conservatives have been after for a long time. So it does kind of place them in a difficult position. I'm confident Pierre Poilievre will fight his way out, but I wonder what it'll mean for him.
I think two things happened with bail reform. One, the Conservatives have been hammering it, and it's occupying a lot of oxygen, and it's on like people's social media feed in Vancouver and Toronto, for example. So it may not match the crime stats, but people feel like it's a really big issue, and people often know somebody who's experienced a crime, and they therefore feel there's more immediacy to it. The other thing is, the Liberals lost a bunch of seats, and there were a lot of seats that were uncomfortably close because they failed to see crime as a really relevant issue, especially in the GTA. So I'm not surprised that that's coming back on the agenda. I think the thing that has changed over the summer is it's not clear who the Liberals' dance partner will be in the House of Commons because of the policy stances that Mr. Carney has taken, and some of the policy stances that his caucus fear he will take, notably on climate change. Who is going to support his budget? There was talk earlier in the year that the Bloc Québécois would give the government 1 year to get its ducks in a row, and that was kind of like the reprieve. But I don't see why Yves-François Blanchet would support the Liberal government's agenda on climate, on an austerity budget, using Mr. Carney's own words, on possible cuts in culture. Why would the Bloc side with the Liberals on this? The NDP, there's absolutely nothing in the budget, at least as it's been explained to us so far, that would see the NDP vote for this. So is Pierre Poilievre going to support the Carney agenda?
Yeah, I mean, he might have to, right? I mean, but Chantal, what does that tell you about how things have shifted and what we should watch for?
I think many Canadians are going with Andrew's reasoning over the tariff issue and what did not happen all summer. Yeah. But some shine has gone off the armor. Sure. Notwithstanding that, the only rational thing that many voters are coming to is they can't see, and I agree with Andrew, what else or who else would have done better. But what I believe will be the real conversation changer, and not just in Parliament, but in public opinion, will be the budget. Because a budget is a document that does reveal the real character of the government. And at this point, I think many Canadians are in a wait-and-see attitude. They're not too sure what is the character of this government. Does it have any red lines, anything that is not negotiable? And I agree with Althea. I would be amazed if the Bloc found its way to support the kind of budget that we are being told to expect. And I think the NDP will also struggle. So for the first time, the government's status as a minority government is about to be really tested in the House of Commons.
Andrew?
I can see all those arguments, but I just cannot see. You'd have to get all three of the main opposition parties to vote against it at the same time. To do so, I mean, unless the budget is a complete, failure with the public, when the Liberals are 6 to 9 points ahead of the Conservatives, when the NDP is flat on its back, they have managed to swallow themselves in the past and avoid taking principled stands on things that you'd think the NDP would take on. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I just can't see it.
But it is true that what Canadians will be, and we'll talk obviously lots more about the budget, what Canadians really probably don't know, and certainly I don't even understand, is where all that austerity is coming from, where those cuts are coming from, and what Mr. Carney said about those things during the election campaign. I mean, that is going to be difficult to manage, I think, Althea.
Well, I think that's the thing that's going to be revealed this fall is like who actually is Mark Carney, because, we didn't test him as an opposition leader for months or years. He said a lot of things in the lead up to the Liberal leadership that he didn't include, notably on climate, in the spring election platform. He said a lot of things in the spring election platform. For example, that Pierre Poilievre was the one that was going to cut pharmacare, that Pierre Poilievre was going to cut foreign aid, that Pierre Poilievre was going to make all these big cuts to government, and Mr. Carney was only going to make $13 billion worth of cuts. Now we're looking at more like $29 billion worth of cuts. He said he wasn't going to cut the public service. He was only going to cap it. But it's really hard to see how he gets to 15% of savings in each almost every government department within the next 3 years without actually slashing the size of the public service. And I will just note here that he has a riding with a lot of public servants in it. So it's, he gave a certain picture during the campaign that doesn't seem like it's going to be the picture that people see in the budget. But that being said, because there's so much public spending in defense, for example, and possibly some of these projects that we're seeing, you're still going to have, you may call it an austerity budget, but it is a budget that is going to be badly in the red ink with, tens of billions of dollars of deficits. So it will give credence also to the Conservatives saying, well, we can't support this. It's a big spending budget.
And that's the reason I can't imagine the official opposition supporting the budget. I also don't believe that Pierre Poilievre, who's campaigning for his job, wants to give his members the impression that he supports the Liberal budget in the lead up to a leadership review. Mark, actually, the Bloc, if it's going to come to that, would rather bring down the government in the fall than in the spring. Why? Because the Quebec election will be coming. Come spring, all the energy is going to be focused on the provincial scene in Quebec. So I think this is going to be maybe a bit of a reality check on Canadians, but also on the Liberals over the next 4 months.
Okay, that's all got me kind of nervous, this conversation. But don't worry, we're going to talk again on Monday when the House comes back. Thank you all for this. That's that issue for tonight. We're going to continue part of this conversation. We'll talk about immigration, another issue that's popped back up on the radar. You can catch that on YouTube or the At Issue podcast. Now back to Adrian in Toronto.
Thanks, Rosie. Up next, ancient sounds heard in Jerusalem's Old City for the first time in 800 years.
It was such an honor to be the one to bring back to life the sound of this marvelous instrument.
A historic organ roars back to life in our moment. That is David Catalunya standing in front of a centuries-old pipe organ at St. Saviour's Monastery in Jerusalem's Old City. And he is standing there because he was not only part of the restoration of this relic, he was also the first person to play that organ after 800 years. That's a moment. So tonight, it's our moment.
It was such an overwhelming emotion. I was working with my team, and the three of us were suddenly like floating into a dream. It was brought to the Holy Land in the 12th century by the Crusaders. So then it was dismantled in the 13th century in order to protect it against a Muslim invasion. These pipes were discovered in the 20th century in Bethlehem and brought to Jerusalem in order to be stored. It was such an honor to be the one to bring back to life the sound of this marvelous instrument. Personally, this sound and this music makes me feel peace. I hope that this project would serve to bring people together rather than anything else.
That's amazing. Think of it, hidden on purpose, roughly 800 years ago, found by accident about 100 years ago, only now being played. And the plan is to create copies of it to be placed in churches all across Europe and the rest of the world so other people can enjoy it too. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.